in Georgetown.
Kaieteur Radio, 99.1 FM.
A pleasant good afternoon to you and welcome to your main newscast right here on Kaieteur Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM. I am Joshua Van Slyckman. Thank you for joining us. Let's get to the top stories we're tracking this afternoon. In our headlines, Gas Assure project must be guided by mandatory studies before being deemed a no-brainer. All of Trinidad's electricity uses only 8% of total natural gas produced. Majority is exported to serve as country's main economic pillar, according to former TNT Energy Minister. Fishermen charged for chopping man following row over money. And West Coast baby's pensioner brutally chopped to death in home. Get the details of these stories and much more. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us right here on Kaieteur Radio. Before any aspect of the intended multi-billion-dollar Gas Assure project could be deemed a no-brainer, it is pertinent for it to be guided by the requisite studies conducted by government and not ExxonMobil subsidiary ESSO. At least, this is the view of Dr. Vincent Adams, former director of the Environmental Protection Agency. Many have argued that the government have been moving a bit too fast and should slow down at least until a thorough plan and proper studies are conducted, since a location was identified prior to an environmental impact assessment being conducted. Vice President Bharath Jagdeo announced that 4 studies will be conducted. However, what was not disclosed by him was that it was ESSO conducting the studies. The bulk of the natural gas produced in Trinidad and Tobago has to be processed in some form or another and exported as liquefied natural gas or simply similar hydrocarbon products, since the country's total electricity consumption only uses about 8% of its total production. In fact, the 100% reliance on natural gas for its electricity generation has also since left TNT in a position where its production far exceeds its peak demand. Former Energy Minister Kevin Ramnarine disclosed that natural gas to electricity constitute about 7 to 8% of all natural gas produced in the country. The bulk is used to make LNG, which is exported, and that LNG business has been the main pillar of Trinidad's economy for the last 21 years. We tell you now that a 68-year-old pensioner of West Coast Berbice who lived alone was found murdered in his home with chop wounds about his face and arms yesterday by police and relatives. Dead is Sergio Diochand of Lot 35, number 3 Village, West Coast Berbice. Relatives of the dead man told Kaieteur Radio that they received a call around 17:30 yesterday informing them that Diochand was chopped in the home. Somebody called and said how somebody chopped up uncle, and then we called the police, and when they go, they see he chop up, a grieving relative said. A nephew who did not want to be named said that his uncle's body was taken to the Fort Wellington Hospital, and when he arrived, he saw him wrapped in a sheet on a stretcher. He said that he unwrapped the sheet and saw Diachand's hand was severed. His stomach had chopped wounds and his face was brutally disfigured with chops. Up to press time, the police were still on the scene. Kaieteur Radio was reliably informed that Diochand was one of the men accused in the double murder of the 2 teenage boys from number 3 Village. He was previously detained and released during the police investigations. A 40-year-old fisherman who was arrested for reportedly chopping a man several times about his body in the company of his brother following a row over money was yesterday released on $300,000 after he was charged with attempted murder. The defendant, Joel Marks of Darmount, Essequibo Coast, appeared in the Mamaruma Magistrates Court before Senior Magistrate Sunil Scare to answer to the charge. Marks was not required to plead to the charge, which alleged that on March 22nd at Kumaka, Northwest District, he chopped a 27-year-old Christopher Bridge Mohan of Kumaka Waterfront. Magistrates cared and granted the man bail, and the matter was adjourned to May 18, 2021. Still to come, man who allegedly forged court order obtained $45 million charge. Judge orders Kaieteur to pay former Minister Ferguson $20 million for libel. Guyana must learn from other oil producers' failure to avoid wastage, according to U.S. business professors. 2 years into oil production, Guyana concludes third attempt at local content policy, says findings fixed on percent domestic capacity to service industry. These and more when the news returns. And 99.5 FM. We tell you now that while beating on Guyana as a winning proposition in light of its oil boom, its government must learn from the past experience and failures of oil sector and gas producing countries to avoid wastage of resources. This in order to remain focused on a strategy to minimize gift and encourage socially responsible practices that can lift a large portion of the population out of its dependence on remittances from the diaspora. The sentiments were among the most recent round of cautionary advice from the emerging oil and gas producing nation, this time coming from US-based finance professor and the Florida International University Deanne Bucci and Jerry Haar, a professor of international business and the institution. The Ministry of Natural Resources has conducted a third draft local content policy for the country, which will be re-engaging stakeholders before the completion of a final document, a time frame within which is still to be announced. The ministry made the announcement on Tuesday, some 2 years since the country started producing oil, and reported that the general focus of the stakeholders' response to the draft document fixated primarily on the state of the current capacity of Guyanese businesses and skills. According to the ministry, the latest version of Guyana's local content policy came about through consultation held with some 180 public and private sector agencies and firms. In a default judgment, High Court Judge Justice Sandra Curtius has ordered Vice President Barath Kaieteur to pay $20 million in damages to former Minister of Communities Annette Ferguson for defamation. Last year, before demeaning office, the junior minister filed a lawsuit against Kaieteur and the Guyana Times newspaper, claiming in excess of $20 million in damages for libel. The case against Guyana Times is still pending in court. However, according to the court order, the default judgment follows Kaieteur's failure to file a defense against the libel suit within the required time. Apart from $20 million in damages, Kaieteur was ordered to pay $75,000 in court costs to Ferguson. A court order also stated that if Kaieteur fails to comply with the terms of order, he will be held in contempt of court and may be liable to imprisonment or to have his assets seized. A man who allegedly forged a court order and obtained $45 million from a Chinese national yesterday appeared in court and was placed on $350,000 bail. The defendant, R.V. Grant, appeared in the Georgetown Magistrates Court before Chief Magistrate Ann McLennan. He denied both charges after they were read to him. It is alleged that between June 2016 and October 2017, Grant conspired with a person or persons to forge one order of the Supreme Court of Judiciary, purporting to show that some orders was made by Justice Jainarayan Singh, knowing the same to be forged. The matter was adjourned to April 14, 2021. It is 12 hours 11 in Guyana and right across the Eastern Caribbean. We now turn our attention to page 7 of the Kaieteur News this afternoon that is dedicated to being blunt. The decisions Cabinet makes has an impact on all citizens of this country. It is therefore non-negotiable that the citizens of this country have the right of head outside of national security issues to know what Cabinet is up to. President Irfan Ali needs to take responsibility and reinstate post-Cabinet press briefings immediately. We now turn attention to the COVID update. According to Worldometer, your COVID-19 cases stands at 128.9 million, with 2.8 million deaths and 104 million recoveries. And that just about wraps things up here on your news package for right here on Kaieteur Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM. Let's remind you that you can get the full details of these stories and much more by picking up a copy of the Kaieteur News at a newsstand near you or head across to our website at kaieteurnewsonline.com. I am Joshua Van Sleckman. Thank you for joining us.
Want value